Let's bring in three MPs now to discuss the government's use of the Emergencies Act and the search for answers around that. Liberal MP Yasir Naqvi is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Emergency Preparedness and a member of the special committee looking into this whole affair. Conservative MP Glen Motz is the Vice Chair of that special committee, and Randall Garrison is the Justice Critic for the NDP. It's good to see you all, gentlemen. Mr. Naqvi, let me start with you. How can you guarantee that Canadians will get a full picture of why the government invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time ever if the government refuses to turn over all of the documents that led to the decision?
Well, Peter, as Canadians know, that the invocation of the Emergencies Act took place in a very unprecedented time for all of us. The kind of illegal occupation that we saw in Ottawa, in my home community, for 24 days, the illegal blockades across the country that disrupted trade between Canada and the United States, all that was really concerning, and government invoked the Emergencies Act to put to the end of it, and revoked the order as well in a very short period of time once the emergency was over. But the government has been very clear that it will be transparent to Canadians as required by the law, and as a result, we've got two very important processes that are ongoing. One, a special joint committee, which Mr. Motz and I are part of, right, that is looking into the exercise of the Act and the functions and the powers that were given under the Act. And most recently, a few days ago, the government also announced an independent public inquiry that is being led
but that's what I'm asking.
Will
Justice Rouleau get to see all the documents he wants to see, even if that involves waiving cabinet confidence?
Well, we cannot presuppose as to the kind of documents Justice Rouleau will need. He's, of course, setting up the commission, and he will work very closely with the government to see what kind of witnesses he wants to hear, what kind of documents he needs, so that he can do his work under the legislation. Mr.
Motz, cabinet confidence is a well-established convention to protect the sensitive discussions that lead to cabinet decisions and the need to protect national security in some cases. It's a protection rarely waived. So why do you believe cabinet confidence should be waived in this case?
Because Canadians expect it, Peter. Canadians expect this government to be accountable and, excuse me, and transparent to them for the invocation of this unprecedented use of the Emergencies Act. You know, even the Prime Minister today talked about how, excuse me, I apologize, talked about how transparent they intend to be, and yet even last night at the committee meeting, both the Public Safety Minister and the Minister of Justice were hiding behind cabinet conferences and lawyer-client privilege, and so that doesn't reveal anything to Canadians, and it certainly doesn't, increase the trust that Canadians have. At a time when Canadians distrust this government, and they have many reasons to distrust this government. Hiding behind these things, it doesn't help. And the fact is, the committee, which Mr. Naqvi and I are privileged to and responsible to get to the bottom of, have taken an oath of secrecy on the matters that might be of sensitive nature. The majority of them will not be. And Canadians deserve to know the truth about what actually caused the invocation in the first place.
Let me move to Mr. Garrison. Mr. Garrison, what's your party's position on cabinet confidence and whether it should apply in this case?
Well, I've got complete confidence in the members of the committee, Mr. Naqvi, Mr. Motz, and certainly Matthew Green from our caucus. They've all taken an oath of confidentiality, so there's absolutely no reason why they don't have all the information put in front of them so we can see how and why the decision was made.
How do you think the inquiry could be hindered or hampered if the government turns to cabinet confidence? What is it you think Canadians wouldn't be hearing?
Well, I think the important part here is that Canadians have to have confidence in the Emergencies Act and the way it is implemented, and they have to know that it was done for a good reason, and they have to know that in the future it will be only used for a good reason. So if you hold back the information at this point, it undermines confidence in the whole system. So that's why we're calling for the release of all the documents, both to the judicial inquiry and to the special committee. We're not saying make them all public tomorrow. We're saying let the people who are doing these inquiries have all the information they need to do their work.
Okay, Mr. Naqvi, the order in council for the inquiry, essentially the terms of reference for Justice Rouleau, focus a lot on the actions of the protesters and the organizers, funding sources, social media disinformation. How do you respond to those who say the government has taken a process built into the law to test whether its invocation of the Emergencies Act met the legal requirement that there was a threat to the sovereignty and security of the country that could not be dealt with under existing laws, and instead has turned that into an inquiry into actions of protesters.
Well, I would encourage all Canadians to look at both the Emergencies Act itself and also the Order in Council, which outlines the terms of reference. The Emergencies Act very clearly says that the purpose of the inquiry is to look at the circumstances leading to the invocation of this unprecedented legislation. So one has to, under the law, look at what happened that resulted in, for the government, to invoke the use of Emergencies Act. And if you look at the Order in Council, you not only see, Peter, that the government has outlined various elements in terms of the convoy, the funding sources, issues around misinformation and disinformation to be looked at because they speak to circumstances leading to the invocation, but also clearly outlines Justice Ugolo to look at the measures that the government introduced through regulations and order when they invoke the emergency. So he's got fairly wide latitude.
Time is short.
Both those things.
Time is short here. Let me move to Mr. Motz. What's your view on that? Doesn't an investigation of the use of the Emergencies Act necessarily, Mr. Motz, have to look at what the government was facing when it made the decision?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the issue that really has to boil down to is Justice Rouleau in the inquiry and this special joint committee is responsible to look at the actions of government and to hold government to account. That's the issue here. It's not the actions of citizens of Canada that are is part of the inquiry or our special committee. It's the actions of government. And so to do that appropriately, Section 62 and 63 of the Act are very, very clear, and the government has gone above that to put some extra parameters around the justice to try and, in my opinion, take away from the responsibilities and the accountabilities that they have as a government and focus them somewhere else. And that, to me, isn't transparent or being accountable.
Mr. Garrison, what's your view on whether the terms of reference for Justice Rouleau are focused on the right things?
Well, I guess my confidence lies with Justice Rouleau, and I don't think he would have taken on this commission to do the inquiry if he thought the scope of his inquiry was unduly fettered. He may, in fact, though, have presumed he'll have access to all the documents, and that's what we're concerned about, is making sure that he has access to what he needs to do his job.
Okay, just to wrap up here, look, there's hopefully, maybe we're not going to be facing deja vu again here, but Mr. Naqvi, there's a big protest heading for the nation's capital again this weekend. Various groups arriving on motorcycles, but they've been told police will block access to Parliament Hill and enforce all bylaws. Do you support the approach to prohibit the protesters from getting their motorcycles anywhere close to Parliament Hill?
Well, law enforcement, as we know, is a matter of a police's jurisdiction. Of course, they have learned lessons, I hope, from the illegal occupation we see. In our democracy, we support peaceful protests as long as they're peaceful. Again, as somebody who represents the downtown community here in Ottawa, I do not want to see the kind of harassment and the harm that our residents and businesses faced in the last occupation, and hopefully this will be a peaceful protest.
Should the threat of that be enough to prohibit people from even getting access even before anything has happened?
No, I think people are free to protest, and I think police will allow to the extent that it's a peaceful protest.
Mr. Motz, what are your thoughts on that, quickly?
The Canadian Constitution and Charter allows us to peacefully protest, and the Canadians certainly have the right to do that in Ottawa's capital.
Should they be allowed on Parliament Hill with their motorcycles?
Of course they should. Well, that's the whole issue. There is laws in Canada, and this is the whole issue about the whole Emergencies Act. The laws in Canada were there and existed, and they were not required for the Emergencies Act to be invoked in the first place. And so if law enforcement wishes to manage any protest on Parliament Hill, the current laws in this country allow them to do so, and could have been used before, and it certainly can be used in this circumstance. But people are allowed to peacefully protest.
Mr. Garrison, a quick final answer from you.
Well, I guess it comes down to this for me. There's a right to protest, but there's not a right to disrupt the lives of other citizens in Ottawa in order to try and coerce certain actions out of the government. So obviously, New Democrats are very strongly in favor of the right to protest. But that's not what's been going on with the previous occupation, and that's not what's being threatened with the current motorcycle occupation.
All right. Thank you all for your time tonight, gentlemen. I do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.